Welcome back to the Producer Podcast. I'm your host, Micah Versman, and joining me today on the season finale is Chad Gundersen. Chad is a co-owner of Out of Order Studios, but today we're excited to talk to him about his work as one of the producers on The Chosen, the first multi-season show about the life of Christ. So without further ado, let's get started. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. You didn't tell me this was the season finale, man. Now the pressure's on. That's exciting.
Yeah, I try not to make it too much pressure on people.
No, it's good, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I guess maybe to start, do you want to just share a little bit about how you got started in the industry and came to start Out of Order Studios?
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, never had a desire, at least growing up, that I remember of being in the industry. So it wasn't like one of these things. I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker since the age 5, and but looking back, there were plenty of times where I had the camcorder out doing things and having fun, and did a lot of theater growing up, did a lot of print work growing up. So I had done some stuff within the industry, more on the acting side of things, but again, never thought of doing it as a career. Like it was never something that, like there was this big, at least until later, that God was showing me that this was what I was supposed to be doing. I was a biology major in school, getting into college, and even going into college really felt like sports medicine was where I was going to go. Played sports, a lot of sports in high school, played football and volleyball in college. And so even in college, starting in college out in California, that was kind of the idea, was that I was going to study biology and then go on to med school and do all those sort of things, and be somewhere in the sports medicine world. And then my freshman year of college, realized that sports was not where God wanted me. I think, and especially, high school football in Texas, is king.
Okay.
And that's, and so, and playing high school football was, obviously I was good enough to go to the next level, but never, I can't say that it wasn't like a dream of mine to continue to go, but it definitely, it becomes a job when you get into school, when you go to college with sports, right? Like you are there to play sports, right? You're there on scholarship, you're there to do that sport, and so it wasn't quote unquote fun anymore for me.
Okay.
And high school football was fun for me, and I enjoyed it, and I worked very hard, and I did all the things you were supposed to. But then when you get into college, it's like, okay, wait a minute, this is why I'm here. Like I'm not here for any other reason than to play football, and then,
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough at this college that I was at, I tried out for their volleyball team and made their volleyball team as well. And when I quit football, of course, the scholarship money disappeared. I was offered to stay and play volleyball, but the volleyball money was not as much as the football money. And so, needless to say, that brought me home back to Texas. And while I was in California, I had done some more, like I was an extra in a couple of really big Hollywood movies. And I remember being on set in LA on a couple of these movies, kind of going, okay, well, this is different, right? Because I had done some commercials and stuff like that as an actor. But again, those were pretty small scale, but sitting on a big Hollywood set, you're like, wow, this is like a thing. Like this is big time, right? And again, but still never thought of it like, oh, I want to go into this industry. It was just more like, this is fun, sort of thing. So came back to Texas, was going to go down to Texas A&M with my brother. My brother was at Texas A&M at the time, and I almost went there initially. And I was like, oh, okay, well, then I'll just transfer down there. When I came back, oddly enough, though, I was a transfer student at that point, not a new student. And as a transfer student, you have to have certain requirements to transfer into a new school. And I literally was 1 credit short of being able to transfer into A&M. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll go to like a JUCO or something for a semester or two. I ended up at the University of North Texas, not a junior college, obviously a very large college here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I had a lot of friends that were going to school up there because it's a local school here to my area. But again, had not intended to stay there. I was like, oh, I'll go there for a semester or two, and then I'll transfer down to A&M and be there with my brother and continue on. Big biology department down at A&M and all that sort of stuff. But my first year of school there at the University of North Texas, the University of North Texas is a big liberal arts school, right? Big theater school, big art school, has a big film department. You know, they're the #1 jazz department in the world. Like, it was so weird going there, and you know, there were all these jazz players going, well, I couldn't decide between here and Juilliard, and so I did pick this because the jazz is better here than Juilliard. Such a weird thing, right? That this kind of the school in northern Texas is this huge liberal arts, specifically on the jazz and music side of things. But the rest of their art departments were quite good as well. So my first year there, I ended up getting cast in like 5 of the student films, you know, because
Okay.
obviously there was the big film department there, and you know, you see the flyer, oh, audition for my student film, and I'm like, sure, I'll go do that. And literally got various parts, the lead in like 2, and like small parts in 2 or 3 others. So I was kind of like, and I remember going to the screening of all these with the film department, and I'm like, well, it's like the Chad show tonight, because I literally was in almost every short film. But then that kind of got me immersed in their film department, started meeting people, continued to kind of do some acting and whatnot. And then within probably a year or 2, again, all the while still studying biology, I did start taking like other classes, like this little film class or a theater class. I started taking a lot of theater because, again, I had done a lot of acting. I'm like, oh, I could do some theater, you know, as like electives and stuff. And so got involved in that department, and and then decided to stay at North Texas. I was like, oh, their biology department's pretty good. I'll continue to do that, and you know, start taking all those science classes and stuff. And then literally probably 2 years later, I ended up starting my first company. And that
Okay.
all happened because of a guy that I met within the film department. Now, he knew he was going to be in the film department, a guy by the name of Joe Scott. And we started Night and Day Films. And we started just shooting anything and everything we could. You know, it was mom and pop shop burrito joints. It was the local furniture store. It was whatever we could shoot, music videos for local bands. You know, again, we're talking about a music town here.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were local bands and stuff. And so within that, so Joe is kind of the writer director. And Joe has stayed in the industry. He's actually kind of a big YouTube star now. He's got a cool channel called Answers with Joe. So go check that out. Really cool, fun channel on YouTube.
All right.
And so he was the writer director. I was the talent, right? So I was the guy holding the burrito, or I was the voice over for that commercial that we did. So by default, our company didn't have a quote unquote producer. Like, it just we didn't have somebody that was kind of putting it all together. And so kind of by default, I started just taking those duties on, and just realized I had a knack for leading the charge, you know, putting the teams together and doing what producers do. And so that's kind of how I got my start in producing.
Mm-hmm.
My senior year of college, I ended up changing from a biology major to a film major. Oddly enough, at the time, they were both part of the same division at school. There's the
Okay.
Department of Arts and Sciences was
Yeah.
the degree you were getting. And so literally all my science classes became my electives. And then I had to go pick up a handful, because I was already, remember I mentioned I was doing some film classes and theater classes and stuff. So, you know, I basically have a degree in biology, just not a piece of paper that says I have a degree in biology. And I'll be the only filmmaker, you know, that, you know, his electives in school were cell biology and, you know, and physics and, you know, and all these biology centric classes. But it was a fairly easy transition, because literally it just went, all my majors were my minors, my minors were my majors, and, you know, and electives and stuff like that. So, you know, started doing that and graduated in 2000. And started doing more and more of those things, short films, you know, that sort of stuff. Did my first major feature film in around 2004, 2005. Oddly enough, that first major feature film was with Dallas Jenkins.
Okay.
So probably 2 or 3 years before that, so a couple years after I graduated, like many people in the world at that time, a fan of the Left Behind series, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that Dallas's dad, Jerry, had written. And I literally hand wrote, you know, like wrote a letter to Jerry, like a fan letter, going, hey, graduated college a couple years ago, getting into the industry, all these, and if these books ever get made into a movie, I'd love to be a part, you know. And then weirdly enough, Jerry wrote me back, and he says, well, it's funny you say that. My son, and Dallas is a year or two older than I am, so he had been out of school a little bit longer. My son Dallas is a part of this process, and he's helping make the Left Behind movies into books into a movie. So Dallas and I connected, chatted, had a pretty good rapport. The long story short there is Dallas ended up leaving that company, and those movies kind of became what they became for various
Mm-hmm.
reasons. Dallas and Jerry decided to separate themselves from that whole thing. So Dallas and I stayed in touch, and then a year or two later, Dallas goes, "Hey, I'm directing my first short film out in LA. Just letting you know." He goes, "But I've already got a producer," and it was kind of this veteran producer, and that producer has actually kind of become a mentor to me, a guy by the name of Scott Lumpkin. He goes, "But hey, if you want to come and help, come on out. We're not really paying anybody or whatever. It's just a short film we're doing out in LA." And Dallas was living in LA at the time. So I literally, bought my own plane ticket, flew out to LA, found a buddy, slept on Dallas's hotel floor and my buddy's house while I was out there, as an unpaid PA on that short film. But by the end of that short film, I was a co-producer.
Oh, wow.
So, and it helped with post-production and did some stuff back here in Texas and helped get the movie finished, color corrected and some other things, sound design and some other things on the post side. So based on that, Dallas goes, "Oh, well, this worked out pretty good." And then a very short time later, Dallas is like, "Hey, I'm doing another short film based on one of my dad's short stories called Midnight Clear." And so Midnight Clear, we did that as a short film first. And then within a year or so, we did Midnight Clear as a feature film. And so Midnight Clear with Stephen Baldwin was my first feature film. And Dallas was the director, and it was his first directed feature and my first produced feature. And so that was, 15, 16 years ago now. And oddly enough, Dallas and I have not worked together since that movie until
Okay.
The Chosen. Obviously stayed in touch and, kept up with each other. What are you working on? What are you doing? Tried like, hey, we need to find another project to do together, and just couldn't find anything. And it just never worked out. And then this came along, and he was looking at possibly bringing it to Texas, and obviously needed a producer, and obviously all that. So that's the Chosen thing. So we'll jump back into the Chosen some more. But after Midnight Clear in 2005, honestly, it just kind of took off, and I produced, golly, 10, 12 more features within the next 5, 6, 7 years. It just kind of became, it's word of mouth, right? And
Yeah.
most of them all in the faith space, right? So it was, working, Kevin Downs was the other producer on Midnight Clear. So Kevin and I did a couple of movies together. Like Dandelion Dust was one of those. They introduced me to Rich Cristiano, and I produced, Secrets of Jonathan Sperry. Then I got introduced to Gary Wheeler, and I did The Trial. And so there was just kind of, at the time, there was probably only, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 of us within the faith community that were
Mm-hmm.
doing this kind of on a full-time basis. Like, this is what we
Okay.
did for a living, right? And it's the Cristianos and the Downs brothers and the Kendricks. And, I remember doing Secrets of Jonathan Sperry, and that's when the Kendricks were doing Fireproof, right? So they were kind
Mm-hmm.
of, getting their launch and getting going. And so just kind of just started producing stuff, and just kind of, again, not ever really intending to produce, but and I still even go, God, really, is this what I'm supposed to be doing with my life? Like, even all these years later. But there's definitely no doubt, and I don't ever envision myself doing anything else. And honestly, I've never done anything else. I always said, I had enough. I had really great part-time jobs that allowed me to go and produce in those
Yeah.
early years, because if I took a full-time job, well, then you can't leave, right? You can't
Yes.
leave your full-time job to go for 2 or 3 months and go work on a movie. So I waited tables, and I was a personal trainer for a while, and did a lot of different kind of things that I could, walk away and come back, a couple months later.
Mm-hmm.
So the producing was going well, right? I'm, within that time frame, not too long after Midnight Clear, I got married. We've got 2 kids now. I have a son who's 15, almost 16, and a daughter that's 12. And they have literally just grown up in the film industry, being on set, doing things. And my wife and I, we joke and say, you know what, I was born in this little small town over here, and she was born in this little small town over here, and now we live in the small town right in between those two small towns, in just outside of the DFW area. And so things just kind of continued to progress, and things were good. About, it's been about 7 years ago now. I had produced a movie by the name of The Redemption of Henry Myers, which is a Western, pretty cool little fun Western that we did. And that movie was set to do a theatrical run with a company. So Chris June, who is my producing partner now in Out of Order Studios, Chris at the time, he was helping small independent films go out into the California area. And he was almost doing kind of like a 4-wall situation, where you rent out a theater and you sell a bunch of tickets, and, kind of that Christian model that was going on there for a long time, where Christians were kind of basically bootstrapping, and I did it with Rich, and, and so this company was doing it as well. And Chris was helping bring the Redemption of Henry Myers to this California area, the Southern California, LA area. And then all of a sudden we struck a deal for a Hallmark deal for that film. So we took the Hallmark deal. It became kind of a Hallmark premiere movie, and did pretty well there on Hallmark. But that nobody ever told Chris from the distributor that we did this deal. And so he was trying to reach somebody, going, hey, I thought we were bringing this to the theaters, and what's going on? And now I hear it's on Hallmark, and nobody was answering, he said, his questions. And so he literally reached out to the Facebook page, kind of going, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of somebody and nobody's answering me. I was still an admin on that Facebook page. So I was like, hey man, I'm the producer of the show. What can I do for you? How can I help you? And so we kind of just chatted about it, and I explained to him what was happening. So then I go and look up Chris, kind of like, who is this Chris June guy? And I look him up, and he's 20 years in the studio system at Sony Pictures, right? And so, and Chris had produced, things like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 1 and 2, and Arthur Christmas, and Surf's Up, and he was visual effects producer on things like Lord of the Rings and Spider-Man, and Polar Express and Beowulf, and just all these huge studio movies in some sort of producing level. And I'm like, what is this guy doing looking at, little low budget Christian films, right? But he and I just kind of connected on a kind of cool level, and just started communicating, through Facebook and stuff like this. And we kind of joke and now say, well, we met online, is kind of how we started dating online, sort of thing. And even our wives were like, who are you talking to? Like, who is this? And his wife was saying the same thing. And my wife was like, who is this guy you're seeing online? You talk to him all the time. And it was just kind of a funny, weird thing. And, he was out there in LA, and I happened to have a trip out there to LA on some projects. And he and I finally met face to face. And it was just so interesting that our backgrounds were so different, right? He's 20 years in the studio system, and I'm 20 years in the independent filmmaking. But our visions for what we wanted to do and what God wanted us to do couldn't be more aligned. And neither one of us were looking to partner. Neither one of us was wanting to do that. But just the long story short there is just God just kind of continued to put the pieces in place. And oddly enough, he knew he was supposed to leave LA and leave Sony. Didn't know why, just knew that God was telling them to do that. And so he, not within a couple of months after we met, he goes, hey, I think I'm moving to Texas. And I kind of was like, well, that's creepy. Why would you come here? Like, that's weird. And he was even saying like the DFW area. And I'm like, okay, that's really creepy, man. Like, we ain't that close yet, sort of thing. And, but he's from Texas, actually. He was born in El Paso. Him and his wife are from El Paso. So they're from Texas already. And his mom actually had been living in the DFW area for quite a few years, a long time, 10, 20 years. So she had been here. So he already kind of had a relationship with the DFW area. And so when he was like, well, when I was thinking about leaving Sony, well, a natural place to go would be to where family is, and to get out of LA and go to Texas and that sort of thing. So the next thing you know, he's here, and our families meet. He's got 2 kids that are the same age as mine, and our kids are close. Our wives are like besties now. And God just did a really cool thing bringing us together. And then as business partners, again, because our backgrounds are so different, we don't step on each other's toes at all. Like what I'm good at, he's not, and what he's good at, I'm clueless on. Like
Yes.
it's just a really good synergistic God thing, the way that we came together. And I think a perfect example of our skill sets is within The Chosen, right? The Chosen is technically a low budget TV show, especially for, another TV. If you compared The Chosen to another show like it in Hollywood, their budget would be 5 to 6 times ours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially at the level that we're doing it and the complexity, and we actually have quite a bit of visual effects within The Chosen that a lot of people just don't see, but they're done at such a great level that most people don't see hardly any of them. And now, of course, some of them you just kind of know they are, but they still look great. And so it just really it shows the diversity of what he and I are capable of as the producers of that sort of thing. And so yeah, so we've been partners in Out of Order. And the name is even a cool thing. We do joke, even though this isn't where the name came from. I'm very much the out, and he's very much the order. I'm kind of the guy out there doing things, finding things, getting the new project, developing, coming up with, doing those types of things. He's the order guy. So coming out of visual effects and animation, things are very structured, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is all about, because, you're dealing with literally tens of thousands of shots and files and all these things. So he just all about, order and structure and all those kinds of things. And I'm very much kind of that out of the box kind of thinker and out there doing things. But the name itself actually came so when Chris and his family were leaving LA, so he quit his job, didn't have another job set up. He sold his house in LA, didn't have a house in Texas. He tried to buy a house in Texas, and the house that he originally was buying fell out of escrow, so he couldn't get it. And so there's just all these things. They were literally driving from LA to Texas, no job, no house, no nothing, just completely just on faith. And his wife, Jen, just kind of goes, you know what, everything we're doing is very out of order within the world system, but we have such a peace that it's completely in order with what God has called us to do, that we're totally fine with it. And so they kind of joked, and I guess Jen goes, that's the name of your new company, it needs to be Out of Order. And so, because again, it's because normally what God does, right, is completely not the way we would do it, right? It's normally
Right.
very, very different. It's out of the world system. And so that's, most people kind of go, well, that doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're faith-based, things need to be tidy in order and all things done decently in order and all those biblical things. And then when we kind of define where the name itself actually came from, they're like, oh, okay, well, that definitely makes sense, because and the way we do things, and again, The Chosen, a lot of the projects that we do, we try to be different than the industry standard. We're really big on relationships and people, and how people are treated in this industry does chew people up and spit them out and do those kinds of things. And we really
Mm-hmm.
just focus on those kinds of things. So it's important to us. And so anyways, and we've produced various things through Out of Order. Obviously, The Chosen is kind of a crown jewel right now. I mean, just couldn't be more proud to be a part of it, and humbled to be a part of it. And working with Dallas and Daryl and all the team on that. And it's been a joy. So that's the very long version of how we got to today, in my background and whatnot. But so anyways, that's kind of where we're at. So yeah.
That's cool. It's been interesting talking to all the producers. It seems like a lot of them didn't plan to be producers, and
Yeah.
yet somehow that's
Yep.
where they always wind up.
Right. Yep. No, it's definitely been a journey for sure. And most people don't really look at me as a producer either. I always get kind of questioned, kind of, what do you do again? Where are you here? I'm just the guy standing back in the corner over there, and most of them just think I'm a grip or something standing back there. But it's been cool. It's been a lot of fun. And again, The Chosen, man, it's our going saying has always been, Lord, just please don't let us mess this up. Like, you're doing something cool with the show, and we as the filmmakers behind it, just don't let us mess it up. Like, just
Hmm.
just keep that going for us. So
For sure. So prior to you working on The Chosen, then had you done any kind of like TV series projects before, or was this your first venture into that realm?
Yeah, it's definitely kind of the first like true TV series. We have done some episodic stuff, some episodic animation. We had done a big game show that was episodic and stuff like that, but just kind of a true traditional TV show. This is the first of that. Now, I will say for the first two seasons, and we're kind of slowly getting away from it now, but season one for sure, we shot it very much like just big movies. Because
Okay.
season one, we shot, the first four episodes, and then we took a break because honestly, we didn't even know if the second four were ever going to get made. Like we hadn't,
Hmm.
we didn't. The show was getting momentum and moving, and we had raised some money and stuff, but we were still like, maybe this will work, maybe not. So we shot the first four, and so we basically shot those first four like one giant big movie. And then when we came back months later to do the second four, we did the same thing. And then in season two, it was a bit of a hybrid, still more film centric, versus episodic film or episodic TV shooting. We shot it a little bit more film, but we started pushing towards that. And then moving forward, we're definitely going to start pushing more towards that episodic method of filmmaking. Um,
Okay.
but it was also our background. It was Dallas's background as a director, was features. It was our backgrounds as producers. So it just made sense to do that. But now as the show grows and gets bigger and does the things that it's doing, it's definitely kind of like, okay, yeah, we got to get more into that kind of traditional episodic shooting sort of things. Now, because we do shoot in Texas and in Utah, and those are probably going to be kind of our main two places that we shoot
Hmm.
moving forward for the remaining seasons. That won't be 100% because obviously we're not going to go back and forth between Utah and Texas, within one
Yeah.
episode. We'll shoot all of Utah and all of Texas or vice versa. So, but yeah, no, it's been cool. But the good thing is, TV in general, because of the streamers and because of the way that people are wanting more of that kind of content, even TV shows are kind of becoming more movie-esque, right?
Yes.
It's not even really your typical TV shows anymore. Now, again, your sitcoms and stuff like that are all still pretty traditional, but with the advent of these big shows and stuff like that, now it's just like we're just making movies, 50-minute movies over and over again, sort of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. So then when it comes to like breaking down an episode of The Chosen into all the different pieces, is that pretty much the same process as what you would do for a feature film, or is it different?
Again, so far it's been fairly more feature film centric, and it also is, we're a bit forced to do that because of the way that Dallas works as well, and
Hmm.
his role within this. Dallas not only is a writer on all of them, but he directs all of them. And most TV shows you have multiple directors,
Yeah.
and so Dallas being kind of our lead visionary on this and the way that he needs to do it, obviously, with most TV shows, you shoot an episode and then the next episode somebody else is directing it. So then the director of that first episode can go and start editing and getting things done on that first one. And then they'll maybe come back the next episode or two episodes later and direct another one because they've had a few weeks, to work on that
Hmm.
first one that they did. Obviously, with Dallas directing everything, we don't have that. We don't have that luxury of kind of having that downtime for him to go and work. So we do have to get the entire season shot. And there are definitely examples nowadays, again, because of this new way that the streamers are doing things, of having that ability and waiting until everything's done, and then you binge it, right? You get a whole thing done, and then you send the whole thing out, and you do it that way. We're in a bit more of a hurry. We don't want to wait 2 years between some of these seasons that you see. Some of these bigger shows, they'll wait a year and a half or more. And we're definitely like, Jesus's ministry is only 3 years long, and we're doing 7 seasons, so we can't take 7 years to do 3 years of ministry. So we're like,
Right.
and again, it won't be 3 and it won't be 7 either. It'll be somewhere in between, but we're definitely trying to keep it going.
Okay.
So yep.
Do you have like any maybe tips or a piece of advice you've learned from breaking down The Chosen that if somebody else is like
Mhm.
first venturing into doing more of a series format, like this would be something to keep in mind breaking it all down?
Yeah, I mean, because we've done it so non-traditional, it's definitely hard to kind of pinpoint one thing. What is unique about TV though, that I kind of even knew before this and definitely know more so now, you have to have an outlet for TV. If you were to go
Hmm.
make a movie, like you at least have a pretty good shot of um, okay, well, if I don't have a distributor yet, I can find one after I get it made, right? I've raised my
Yeah.
money and I'm going to go do it. But with TV, and again, not saying it can't happen, because in this industry, literally anything does happen and it can happen and it will happen, right? I mean,
Yes.
but with TV, typically you've got to know where the platform is going to go, right? So having Angel Studios kind of already behind us and ready to go and trying to figure things out. But heck, even that changed. There was the goal was never to give the show away for free. That was not the
Hmm.
original intent. God had other plans with that one, and he basically just kind of showed us, the more you give this away, the more I'm going to bless it. And so we literally were like, well, let's just give it all away. And that has happened, right? And so, but again, that's completely like there is no business plan anywhere, let alone in
Yeah.
Hollywood. Like, Hollywood still kind of looks at us and goes, "What? You guys are you're doing really well and you're making a lot of money and there's money coming in to help you make the show and do it, but yet you give it away for free? Like, how do you, they're just like, that's great that you're doing that, but that can't work in any way, shape, or fashion within the system that is Hollywood." So it's very much outside that system. So given that, The Chosen has definitely kind of become a bit of an anomaly. So I definitely
Mhm.
wouldn't recommend using it as a case study of how to go make more TV shows.
Right.
Um, but I do think it is opening the doors and for people to kind of think a bit outside the box. And the Angel guys are doing that. They've got other projects that they're developing and putting together and raising funds for. Because what I do think is that if you give people what they want, then they are willing to back it. And I do
Hmm.
think that there are multiple projects that they're developing. Obviously, The Chosen continues to succeed. And at the end of the day, people are just like, well, we want to see this show made. And that's why we give to this show, right? And at the end of the day, they're not necessarily giving, they're kind of sowing a seed, right? The whole pay it forward thing we're doing, they're not giving donations. I mean, they're saying, I want to pay for somebody else to watch the show. I get to see it for free.
Yeah.
But because I get to see it for free, I want somebody else to see it for free, so at the end it becomes not free because they're giving money to go do that, but they're doing it of their own free will. They're not required. They can watch it for free and not give money. There's nothing that stops them from doing that. So it's just it's been such a cool thing, but it also is not a traditional thing. And so to be able to copy that or to do it in the same way, I don't know if that's going to work. I kind of want it to. I mean, I'd love to see
Hmm.
that happen. But I think the advice I would give anybody wanting to do a TV series is, where are you going to go with it? That needs to be the very first question that you're going to
Okay.
answer, is what platform, what's the audience for it, and how are you going to get it out there? Is it going to be its own app like The Chosen, which is not easy and not cheap and all those types of things? Is it going to be on YouTube, which there's something for that, and I do think more and more things will start going to the YouTube platform. But then you've got to kind of go partner with YouTube and get that going, and or have your own channel like we do, because we put all of our episodes on YouTube as well. Or is it VidAngel itself, or Angel Studios now itself, their platform? Or are you going to go try to find one of the other traditional Netflix, Amazon, Hulu? And there's some other ones that are coming. Obviously, PureFlix has their thing going, and they've continued to make waves and progress and get bigger and bigger. And their partnership now with Sony is a great thing. So I think that's probably the very first question you got to answer, is where are you going to go with this thing? What's the outlet? And then start kind of forming it towards that, or working with them directly if they like your idea or whatever, to figure those things out. So yeah,
Sounds
that'd be my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, those are some good thoughts. Um, so another question I had, because so much of The Chosen does take place outside. So how do you deal with when the weather doesn't cooperate with what you need to shoot?
Well, the weather never cooperates, ever, ever, ever. It's definitely become a thing with The Chosen that if it can go wrong, it will go wrong.
Hmm.
And we kind of joke and go, well, that's The Chosen. Well, that's the chosen way, right? because season one, we were shooting in the fall for the first, for the first 4 episodes, we were shooting in the fall in Texas. And that September, so that would have been September of 18, is that right? Yeah, September of 18. Like you go look it up and it literally was like one of, if not the wettest September in the history of the state. Like
Wow.
for real, like come on now, like really, it's and so we dealt with flooding, we dealt with mud, we dealt with all these things. It was a little cold but not horrible. So that was the first 4 episodes. Then the second 4 we shot in the summer, and it's summertime in Texas. I mean, come on. I think it's 101 out today. Like right now, as we speak, it's 101 outside. So that's summertime in Texas. That's fairly standard. So that's not horrible. I mean, it's horrible for anybody that's not from Texas, but most of us Texans are like, well, that's just kind of what we deal with, right? So the crews don't care. But obviously, we had a lot of cast and crew that were not from Texas, and they're like, what is going on? Because and Texas heat is a little different than most because of the humidity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's not the dry heat that people talk about. People are like, man, it's just like thick here, like and so that was that. And then of course for season 2 we had the ice apocalypse that happened and that happened literally the week after Sermon on the Mount. That when we shot Sermon on the Mount, that day Sermon on the Mount was in the high 20s. It was misty and stuff, but that ice rolled in literally the next day and shut us down for a week. And again, breaking records. It was like the worst winter storm that Texas had ever seen, right? And just shut us down, and the electricity was out and the power grid, and and the ice that we got, and it was negatives. Like, well, Texas sees 20s, 30s. Like if we see teens, like that's a really big deal that we've seen the teens. And in Texas as well, because Texas, again, if you look at a weather map, my wife is a big weather person, so I know all these things. But Texas is in the jet stream that goes through the United States. And so the jet stream, if it drops out of the mountains, then you'll get these little cold spells in Texas. But it typically, like if it lasts for a day or two, like that's a big deal. Like we get like maybe one little ice storm a year, but it'll last for like a day. And then every 5 years we get a little bit of snow or whatever. Now up in the Panhandle and stuff, but again, where we're at in the DFW area, like you just don't see it, right? And so for us to get over a week of not just snow but ice and negative temperatures, not single digits, not 0 but negative, like we just don't see that. Like it's just unheard of. So there was just all these things that happened so perfectly with that, perfectly in a bad way. And so we always kind of joke, we'll go, that's the Chosen, that's what happens with the Chosen. And so we got shut down for a week. But with all of those things, and there's a lot of little things that happen all the time with the show that we laugh about and go, oh, that's the Chosen. But what we found, and Dallas and his wife have kind of dubbed these the Red Sea moments.
Okay.
Right, where it's like, okay, you're the the Israelites up against the Red Sea here, and you have no other choice. Like literally, the sea has to part, or we're gonna die. And obviously, we haven't been close to dying yet on the Chosen. But it is one of those things where we just get to the point where, like, all right, Lord, we have no clue what to do. Like we are shut down, or you have to do something. And time again, He has found and shown us and given us resolve and solutions that we never would have done, and that are honestly better than what we would have thought. The way that it ended up, or the way it got shot, or whatever it is. And so there's just all these little moments throughout the show. And I mean, heck, Dallas could do a whole series on the stories, of these types of things that have happened throughout each season. And there was more than just the ice one. We had a couple of them in season 2 that were pretty fun, that were pretty funny, and so it was pretty cool to watch. Now, again, not cool to experience, but cool to watch. Watch God do that. So yes, weather, but that's just that's the industry, right? I mean, you hear these things all the time in the industry, and that's pretty standard that we have to deal with it, because you can't stop. Like you just can't. I mean, it has to be so bad that the ice apocalypse is there for you to stop. Like it's like physically impossible people to travel, but otherwise you find a way. You find a way to keep shooting. And obviously people in this industry, and a lot of our cast and crew specifically, their resolve is just next to nothing. And people love this show so much now that they are willing to just suffer. They're willing. Our cast is just, they are troopers. They are out there doing their thing. And the crew is just like, nope, let's figure it out. What do we need to do? And so the show has just become something that people just support and are in love with and want to be behind. And this is believers and non-believers alike. I mean, we have just a vast variety of people that work on our show because, our viewpoint is we want the best person for the job.
Yeah.
We're not here. And again, there are certain productions out there that they only hire believers and they only do those kinds of things. And that's fine. If that's what God called them to do, then great. But for myself and for Chris and for Dallas and for the rest of the team, at the end of the day, we want the best person for the job, and they're going to respect what we do. And, we have conversations with people, but it's just, it's awesome to watch people get in an environment of not only believers, but also believers that want excellence. And that's a big thing for us, is that we want excellence. We want the best of the best. And people within the arts, like filmmakers, when they see that you want that, regardless of whether they believe in your cause or believe in your show, but they see that you want to do it well, now all of a sudden they jump on board with that and they want to do it well too. And then everybody starts elevating themselves. And The Chosen has definitely kind of become that perfect storm, we kind of call it.
Okay.
Like it's just, again, within the faith community, sadly, within the faith filmmaking space, there's normally something missing, whatever it is, right? The writing's not very good. But the story's really good, but the writing was bad, but the heart was there. So that was good. Or the acting wasn't good, or the directing was good, but they had no money. So it looks like junk, or like there's just always something missing, right? And a lot of it is normally the writing, to be honest with you. And I think our writers are literally next level on The Chosen. And it's one of the things we get the most comments about. As good as it looks, and production and the acting and all the different things, as good as they are, the writing is outstanding on The Chosen.
Yeah.
It really is. And so I think with The Chosen, it's become that kind of perfect storm, right? We have all these people at the top of their game, whether it's our cinematographer or our production designer or our costume designer or hair, makeup, wardrobe. I mean, whatever it is, combined with what Dallas wants to do and what we're trying to give him and all those kinds of things, it just kind of became this thing, and The Chosen has become that. And so, but we have some amazing people that kind of overcome those things. But we just kind of laugh and go, golly, what in the world is going to happen next? Like what other thing? Like, we're in Texas, so it's anything's possible. So we'll see.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of how the support has grown so much for the show. Did that make producing season 2 challenging at all, now that there was like this expectation from people as opposed to when you were doing season 1?
Sure. Yeah, no, it definitely, so within kind of the inner workings of The Chosen, we'd always talked, like in season 1, at the end of season 1, when things kind of started getting kind of successful, like, okay, well, I think we're actually going to be able to make this. And I think we can go and make multiple seasons, or at least another season, at least a season 2. And so we were like, okay, well, to see this huge level of success, maybe season 4 or 5, like that's when we would finally get there. But to be honest with you, the level of success that we're seeing now, and this was even before season 2 fully came out, we are seeing the success that we probably were anticipating maybe at the end of season 3 or 4, or even into season 5. And so
Okay.
it's accelerated much faster than all of us thought would. Like, it did not. Everybody's kind of like, didn't see this coming, like no way, and so now it's, our joke is Lord, just don't let us screw this up. Like, just don't let us mess this up again. I mentioned before, like, he is doing something with this show that nobody saw, nobody anticipated, and so now it's just like, okay, let's just take our time and make sure we do it right. And we're doing some things in preparation for season 3 that's taking us a little longer to get season 3 out than what we want it to be, but we hope our audience knows, and we hope people know that we're doing it because we want to make sure that we stay at, if not exceed, the level that we've already been at, right? And so it's kind of like we kind of pushed the envelope quite a bit with season 2, and it's kind of like, maybe we should have paced ourselves a little bit more, because now he's like, you got to keep outperforming, right? You got to keep making the next season bigger and better and great. And the good thing is we have a pretty good roadmap of where we're going. I mean, we know the story we're telling, right? And everybody's read it. Everybody knows the story we're telling. So there's not going to be there's no surprises. Like, we're not going to do something and they go, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. you know, they're going to see it coming. They just may not see the way that it came. And that's kind of that's always been our big thing too, right? Is what, the way that we're presenting things and the way that the writers in Dallas portray these things. That's the key.
Right.
Obviously the humanistic side of it and all those things has been a big part of it. And so I don't know, it'll be interesting to see, how it unfolds. And I'm already, you know, as the writers continue to work, we're having talks, and season 3 is going to be a big one. It's going to be interesting. So the challenges continue.
I bet. So I did want to talk a little bit about that one shot scene in season 2 of the show.
Yeah.
Like, what was your thoughts as a producer when you first found out that's how they wanted to do that?
Yep. No way we're doing it. No way. Like, you know, and you know, you're a filmmaker, you're a fan, you know how this works. I mean, when we filmmakers hear about like a 3 or 4 or 5 minute shot in a show or a movie or something, like we go and study it and we watch it and we're like, oh my gosh, what did they do there? And how did they get through that kitchen, or how did they come through that parking lot? Whatever they do, right? And so when Dallas is like, yeah, I want to do half the episode in one shot. And we're like, well, the episode's about half an hour. So you're talking 15, 20 minutes. You're going to do one 15, 20-minute shot. He goes, yep, that's what I want to do. And we're like, no way. Like there's just, and I remember early on, and everybody kind of just laughed, and then it just kind of became, I think we're actually going to go try to pull this off, you know? And so that day was a crazy one. So first and foremost, I was in quarantine on that day. My wife had gotten COVID. I never did get COVID. I haven't had COVID and never did get it, but my wife had gotten it. So because she had gotten it, I had to go, you know, I had to go in quarantine because obviously I'd been around her. And so I was in my hotel on that day, which was one of the biggest days of the whole year. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm gonna miss this. So I'm literally on the phone and video calling and listening and watching and doing all these things. Chris, the producing partner, Chris, the other producer on the show, was with Dallas the whole day, and they laugh and go, yeah, we were kind of holding hands the whole time, just kind of fearful of how this was going to go. And literally it just, again, it's another one of those Red Sea moments. Like, first of all, if we didn't get it all in one day, it would throw our schedule off a lot. Like, because we'd have to come back the next day and try again. And then, you know how it is, the ripple effect of scheduling and filmmaking is just, it'll implode you, right? And you're already dealing with things always, right? So, so the plan is literally for 6 hours from when we got there, 6 a.m. we'll call it, till lunchtime. At 6 hours later, around noon, they were just going to rehearse, right?
Okay.
They were just going to block and get all the actors out there and the extras out there and do it. And they had talked about it and mapped it out and done all these things, but just all morning long, it's rehearse. We had to bring in this kind of specialty Steadicam rig guy that came in. He was a specialist. There's not very many of this type of rig because the way it moves up and down, and obviously Steadicam in general is just a fun, crazy thing, but it was a huge rig. So this poor guy too. So they rehearse it all day long. Don't get a shot off, obviously, before lunch. Come back after lunch, rehearse a little bit more. Finally, it's time to get the first shot off. And so, mind you, I think we actually did the whole take maybe 4 times.
Oh,
completely.
wow.
So the first time they do it, you know, it's, and a few things to keep in mind. We had to kind of shoot at high noon because of the way, and if you've watched the shot, the way the camera's moving around the actors and stuff, you had to be careful of things like shadows and stuff, because if the sun's high, there's no shadows. But if all of a sudden the sun starts getting kind of over here, you know, like, you know, 3, 4, 5 o'clock, well, then all of a sudden now you're casting these really long shadows. So the long and short of it is we got one take in, decent but not great, couple of bumps, couple of this, couple of that. So we're like, okay, that's definitely not going to work, but at least we got through it. Then the second time they started going, one of the actors fumbled a line, and it was a pretty important line. And so it's like, okay, fine. But we were a few minutes into it. And again, once you get 4 or 5 minutes in, it's like, golly, you're like, oh, I gotta start all over. Because again, it's not like, oh, well, we were so close. Like we weren't even halfway there, right? So this actor fumbles the line, and then we do it again, and he fumbles the same one. And then it becomes, it's in his head, right? Like now, you know, so we had to take some time, and Dallas had to work with him, and it's kind of figure it out. Like, okay, just, it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be fine. No big deal. So we finally get past that, and then the steady cam guy starts getting tired. So there was one take that we were about halfway through and he goes, I'm about to just like literally pass out. I've got to take a break. Like, I just can't hold this rig. And this guy by no means was like an out of shape guy that, he was a man, like he was just, and he was killing it and doing an amazing job. But he was just like, just what we're trying to do, we can't do it that way. So we have to take a break. So we're taking a break. So haven't had a full take yet that was even remotely usable, and only one at that point. And then it gets to the point, again, I'm trying to remember all the exacts, because remember, I wasn't there. I'm getting all this information via everybody on set, and I'm watching, my phone and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden the sun starts going down. So he's in the middle of a take. It's going really, really well. And then all of a sudden the operator just stops and he goes, I'm seeing my shadow. I'm seeing it everywhere I go. Like, it's everywhere. So then we literally have to shut down, because it's like, until the sun goes completely down and there's no shadows, well, we can't keep doing it. So then we're like, okay, well, crap, we'll have, you have probably half hour, 45 minutes once the sun goes down of light left before it's too dark to do anything. So then we're like, okay, we're waiting. The sun goes down and we start going. So we get going, sun's going down, and we make it almost all the way through, but there was a couple of bumps in it. Like, there was just bumps, and they're looking at him, the visual effects guy's there and Chris is there, and they're all kind of going, I don't think we can, because there's certain things you can do in post-production to get rid of drift and different bumps and hiccups and stuff. And they're like, I think it's too much. I don't think we'll be able to get rid of it. It's like, we got to go again. So we finally get to it, and it's literally, we have like, and you can look at the sun and know, like, you can time it, like it's going to be gone here in like 15 minutes. So we're like, we have literally one take left. We have one take left for the day, or we don't get it. And that one take is the take that you saw in the show.
Okay.
And the amazing thing about that one take, and again, couldn't have timed it, definitely wouldn't prefer to do it that. We would have loved to have gotten it earlier in the day. But as I'm sure you've watched it, right? You feel it getting later in the day as you're watching it, because when it starts versus when they're sitting around that fireplace, it's dark. And so that transition, so it's another one of those kind of Red Sea moments of going, we could not have planned this any better. We couldn't have figured this out. We couldn't have, there's no way we would have done it, because you're risking way too much. But we literally, like I said, we probably did maybe 4 full takes, and that was the one that we had it. And the funny thing is, and it's, I won't tell you where it is, but there's a moment in there where one of the actors is going and he's saying his line, and it's pretty close to the end. Like, and if we don't get it, and you see the actor, he says his line and he pauses, and we as the filmmakers, we know that there's no pause right there. He's supposed to keep, and you can see barely, I mean, we could see it, but the audience doesn't see it, that he loses it. Like, he's like, oh crap, like, oh my gosh, if I fumble my line, and all of a sudden it just hits him and he jumps right back in, and it feels very natural, one of those things. But you can imagine like this sigh of relief of everybody going, oh my gosh, if he loses it right now, and this is it, this is the last take, we can't do it again. It's towards the end and it's getting dark, and there's no way we could have reset and done it again. And he just has this moment, and again, it's probably a second pause, but for us it felt like an eternity.
Yes.
And he just picks it right back up and keeps going, and it felt fine and nobody noticed. But literally, I remember Dallas called me after, video called me, and he's almost got tears in his eyes going, oh my gosh, dude, I cannot believe we did it. I can't believe we got it. Like, it was a big deal. So it was one of those, man, I don't want to do that again, but man, it was cool to do. It was cool to do. So,
I bet.
Yep.
So I do have to ask with that, did you have any like key takeaways? Like, if you had to do another one shot, even if it wasn't, 15-minute one, like, I would do this again, or I wouldn't do it that way?
Well, I think what it is you learn to kind of go, okay, how would we prepare differently? I mean, now that now that you've done it, now you're like, oh, I can conquer the world. I could do this again. Like, oh, there's no problem, And so of course now you want to try it. And as filmmakers, right, that's what you want to do, is you want to go, okay, well, what can I do now? What can we do better or more or more extreme? And now it's kind of like, now, sure, you don't want to waste things like that, because to be honest with you, most audience members don't know those kinds of things. That's definitely more of a geeky filmmaker kind of thing that we get excited about as filmmakers, or cinephiles that really, they may not be filmmakers, but they love movies and they love things like that. So yeah, it definitely was a thing of going, okay, it made sense and it worked and it's good, but I don't, you'd have to really find the right moment again to do it again for that sort of thing. So,
All right. So I got a couple kind of wrap up questions.
okay.
So first one would be maybe, and there probably isn't a normal day, but kind of what's a normal day for a producer like you look like on set?
On set, I like to say that if you see me, well, with producers and on the production side, it's all in the prep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because once you're there, like it's time to go. Like we got to be shooting, we got to go, right? But um, but I'm kind of a fireman, at the
Okay.
time. Like once, because at the end of the day, no matter how well you plan and how well you get, things are still going to go wrong and things are still going to adjust. And so the key is how can you adjust in the moment, right? And so that's kind of the big thing, is kind of going, okay, well, now that we're here and we've scheduled it and we've planned it and we've rehearsed it and we've done all the things, and now what things can go wrong and how fast can we solve them, because they always go wrong. Things are always, it's constant, it's every day, all day. And so, I've got a great team. My production manager, Carrie, she's my right hand and unbelievable. And our entire office staff, Renee and our accounting team and all them, they're just all unbelievable at what they do. People like Adam, who's our first AD, they're great. So again, it kind of goes back to that whole perfect storm. Like we just have these teams that are great. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the key to filmmaking, right? Find people that not only you kind of like a little bit, but that are also really, really good at their job. Um,
Yes.
and so yeah, I mean, that's my typical day once we're shooting, is just kind of putting out fires as they come up and that resolve. And I would say that's kind of something that I'm pretty good at. Like, first and foremost, my wife tells me I have patience to a fault, so things don't rattle me. I don't get upset. I don't get mad. I also say, look, we're making movies for a living here. We're not curing cancer. We're not, saving lives. We're entertainers, and we are blessed and fortunate to do what we do. So
Mm-hmm.
people that get upset or stress or whatever, I'm like, man, this is not the industry for you, because the stress and stuff is coming. Like it's a stressful, difficult, you know, not everybody does this, and people would love to do what we do. So I'm just like, look, if that's the attitude you've got, then you need to figure out a better place to be, because this is just not the industry for you. And for me, it just, things don't rattle me, things don't bother me. Things bother me in the sense that, I'm more of one of those. Um, if a problem happens, if an issue happens, I don't point fingers. I'm one of those, let's solve the problem right now. Because I like to say, look, there's a lot of ways to solve problems, and there's one guaranteed way to never solve the problem, and that's to complain about it. Can't solve the
Okay.
problem just sitting there complaining about it. So I'm
Right.
one of those people, like, right now, let's solve the problem. I don't care whose fault it is. I don't Now, again, if something was intentional or malice or something like that, then of course that's a whole other story. I'm just talking about something going wrong, right? And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
one of those, let's solve the problem right now. I don't care whose fault it is. I don't And if anybody's pointing fingers, I'll get mad. I don't do any of that sort of stuff. Now, sure, we may have a conversation at lunch. We may have a conversation later in the day. You may or may not return tomorrow. There's all those things that may or may not happen, but I am one of those, in the moment, just solve the problem. Like whatever it is, something broke, something was forgotten, something is done wrong, whatever it is, let's just solve the problem. you know and I also tell people, I'm like, if you see me doing something, like, and not that I do nothing, but like if you see me carrying gear, or you see me going after something, or you see me going to do things, there's a problem, because that means
Mm-hmm.
somebody else isn't doing it. Right. And
Right.
part of my job is to make sure that everybody's doing their job, right? And so if something isn't there, or something's forgotten or not done or whatever, and I'm doing it, that means somebody else isn't doing their job. And so but I'm of the opinion, as the producer of the show, and so people like myself and Dallas and all those, at the end of the day, as the producer of the show, everything's my fault. Everything.
Yeah.
And that's the mentality that I take. Everything's my fault. Something goes wrong, it's my fault, because I didn't prepare properly, or if it's somebody else's quote unquote fault, I hired that person, so that's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, they may be great, and it just may be an honest mistake, and honest mistakes happen all the time. But that, and when the attitude is that everything's my fault, then I'm okay with whatever goes wrong, because I'm the one that's going to go solve it. I'll go figure it out, and do that sort of thing. So so yeah, a typical day, there is no typical day, and that's just it, right? Because every day is different. And it is something that we do love about this industry. The people that are in this industry love is every project's different, everything is different, every day is different, every circumstance is different. And that's kind of what makes it exciting. It's not your, it's not a 9 to 5 job. Let's just say that for sure.
That
So,
that is for sure.
yep.
So then my final question for you is, do you have any advice to filmmakers about how to balance devoting time to getting the project done, but still devoting time to your family?
That's a good one, man. That is, and that's huge. I mean, it couldn't be more. If there was one thing that I focus on the most within my job, it's that balance right there. All the way to the point where my wife and I, very early on, like all the way back when Dallas and I, did that first film together 15 years ago, and I've been married for 17 years now, and it's been more than 15 years ago because my wife and I were just married about a year when we made that film.
Okay.
And so we things like we have a 2-week rule. We never spend more than 2 weeks apart, wherever I'm at in the world, wherever project I'm on, whatever it is. And so either my wife and kids are packing up and coming to me, or I'm coming home. And sure, there's been times where we may have gone a little bit over that 2-week rule, but for the most part, that's our rule. We just don't spend more than 2 weeks apart. So they'll come and they'll hang out and they'll do whatever and all those types of things and just be there. Um, um, and then from there, just always keeping in mind what the priorities are, and we treat everybody on our show this way. For example, we had a very, very important individual on our show this past season that within a 2-week period, both her dad and her brother passed away. So very big traumatic moment for this individual. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
her position is extremely important, very, very high level. But it was one of those things where none of us even blinked. We're like, you leave right now and go take care of your family. And you do
Yes.
what needs to be done. Like, we don't care about the show. We don't care about that. We'll figure all this stuff out. And she'll even say, kind of coming back, she goes, it was just great to feel that support. And we treat everybody that way. If they have a problem, if there's a sick kid at home, or there's an issue, or a wife or a husband or a mom or a dad needs something, and we find that out, and we find out that people aren't going and address that, we're just like, no, you go get on a plane right now and you go home and you take care of it. When you're ready to come back, you can come back if you need to come back at all. And if you don't need to come back, that's fine. We're not going to hold it against you. You're not going to be mad about it or any of those things. And so it's just, it's a family first sort of thing, right? Which obviously is an extremely biblical thing, right? I mean, family has
Mm-hmm.
got to take priority. And, it's just kind of that whole, if God is first, then all the other priorities kind of come in line, and so, and that's a big, big thing for us. And so we encourage that because this industry is very, very hard to have a family, right? I mean, it's kind of almost a
Yes.
joke within the industry of, oh, well, that other couple's getting divorced. Oh, what a big surprise. Oh my gosh, like, oh, that kid got screwed up because his parents were whatever, right? You just hear the stories, and some of them are stereotypes and some of them are real. Um, and so it is something that we do focus on a lot, and it's important to Dallas. Dallas is a family man. I'm a family man. Chris is. The other producers are. We're all family people, and we're very family oriented. And so, but we also find out that when people feel like they're being taken care of, then they work that much harder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus their work is not going to be good if they're sitting there stressing about what's going on at home because
Yeah.
my kid is sick, or my wife needs something, or my husband is whatever. Like, pick the issue, right? And people don't work well that way. Versus, give that person a day or two to go figure out their stuff, and then let them come back and be rejuvenated and ready to go, and things are settled at home, and or whatever the issue is, right? And so, so it's an excellent question, and it's something that is of the highest priority for not just me personally as a producer, but I can definitely say within the Chosen, for sure, it's a family situation, and we go through great lengths to try to figure that out, and how can we help, and what can we do to make it better for you? Because at the end of the day, people make movies, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
computers don't make movies, cameras don't make movies, lights don't make movies, people make movies. And if you don't take care of the people, then your movie's not going to be good, right? And again, this
Yes.
industry has such a um, kind of a churn and burn type mentality. Like, well, if you don't want to do what I'm asking you to do, I'll find somebody that will, because people are begging to be in this industry. And if you don't want to do it, then I'll just find somebody else. If you don't want to work for free, or you don't want to work for this rate or whatever. And sure, there's some truth to, hey, if our budget is what our budget is, and I can only pay you this much, then, but at the same time, I don't get mad at people for taking a quote unquote better job. Like, I'm not going to hold
Right.
that against you. I'm not going to hold it against you that you want to go pay your bills. Like, why would I do that? You know, I mean, and if anything, there are times we found out that people get offered jobs and we make them leave. We're like, no, you are going on that show. You're going to go and leave our show and go there, and we'll find somebody else, and we'll see you again. And because this is all relational, right? The movies, they will come and go, and the TV shows will come and go, and, you know, and it'll be forgotten or remembered in a very faint way or whatever. But at the end of the day, these relationships, and I have people that I have been making movies with, like on that very first movie that Dallas and I made together, the same production designer from that very first movie is the production designer on The Chosen, James Cunningham.
Okay.
And James has done, golly, 6 or 8 of my movies. And I want to say he's done at least 1 or 2 of Dallas's features, and then a lot of his short films. And so it's one of these things where we love James to death, you know. Now we fight like brothers, right? You know, and we all want to headbutt each
Yes.
other and get mad, but that's the relationship, right? Because we have this history there. But it's not just his genius. I mean, if you've seen The Chosen, you can see his genius at work. It's the perfect example of his genius at work as a production designer, because so many of the things in The Chosen, it was a blank slate, and everything you're
Yeah.
seeing is done. There's no like, oh, well, we walked into this room and this is, you know, here's your office and it's great, and oh, we just need to change some things, but it's an office, right? Versus it was literally nothing and James turned it into something. You know, and again, you combine that with the keys and the cinematography, and again, it kind of takes us back to that perfect storm sort of thing of the show. So, but that kind of shows it, that there's a family mentality there of that we've all worked together for years and years on projects and projects. And again, that is something you see a lot of times in Hollywood. You know, it's that director working with that same designer or that same DP or those same actors or whatever it is, because there's a relationship there that can that you can rely on. But it's same thing with family. If James ever has an issue, then I'm sending him home to go fix that issue so he can come back and do his job, you know. So yeah, it's important. So good question.
Yeah. And definitely a good one to kind of wrap things up on. So thank you so much for coming on
Yeah,
the
man.
show today.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it, and I'm glad we finally got to do it. I know we've been trying to connect for some time, so it's great to finally do that, and appreciate you having me on. And hopefully this is a good season finale for you. So
Well, I definitely enjoyed it. So
cool, man. Me too, man.
And with that, we're going to wrap up season 3 of the Producer Podcast. Thank you to all our subscribers and followers for joining us once again on another exciting season of the show. And stay tuned for more updates on season 4 coming in early 2022. Until then, make sure you subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.